"Are you his mother?" "Yes." "Are you deceased?" Nora Hale stared at the inspector, as though the question itself had struck her. Behind him, an 8-year-old boy pressed both hands against the small window of a locked carriage. "Mama!" Nora lunged towards the vehicle. A guard caught her by the arm. "That is my son," she cried. "I never gave him away." Across the courtyard of Wexford Union House, Duke Sebastian Wexford stood beside a display of carefully prepared reform charts. Only moments earlier, he had been explaining how his program had reduced the number of children dependent upon public relief. Now, Thomas Hale was calling for his mother from a carriage, prepared to take him more than 100 miles away. Sebastian raised one hand. "The board has assumed temporary guardianship." Nora tore herself free from the guard and held up a worn birth certificate. "I entered this place because I was ill. I did not sign away my children." The chief inspector looked down at the open ledger in his hands. Thomas Hale's entry stated, age, 8. Status, orphan. Parents, deceased. Premium received, £10. Term of apprenticeship, 10 years. The inspector looked again at Nora. She was thin, exhausted, and very much alive. "Your Grace," he said, "why has this child's living mother been recorded as dead?" Sebastian's answer came too slowly. "The classification refers to functional guardianship." The inspector's expression hardened. "The word written here is deceased." Around the courtyard, women began lifting documents above their heads. Birth records, unanswered petitions, applications to reclaim their children, names of distant factories. Sebastian looked beyond them towards the rows of empty beds he had prepared to display as proof of success. For the first time, they no longer looked like evidence of children rescued from poverty. They looked like evidence of children removed from sight. 6 years earlier, Wexford Union House had been a disgrace. Families slept in damp rooms where winter air entered through cracked walls. Sick residents shared bedding with the healthy. Food purchased by the county vanished before reaching the kitchen. Children were beaten for failing to finish work they were too young to perform. Sebastian changed that. He dismissed corrupt administrators. He repaired the roofs, improved ventilation, and opened a proper infirmary. He forbade the use of whips. He ordered every meal weighed and every death reviewed. He spent his own money on classrooms, books, and vocational workshops. Newspapers called him a practical humanitarian. Landowners praised him because the institution became cleaner while its costs fell. Parents initially trusted him because he spoke about dignity rather than punishment. Sebastian believed that trust was deserved. He had seen suffering and acted. What he did not understand was that improving a prison did not give him ownership of everyone inside it. His greatest reform was called the placement program. Children old enough to work were sent to approved employers as apprentices. Some went to farms, others to printing houses, textile workshops, shoemakers, or rope manufacturers. The official reports described them as young paupers rescued from idleness and taught useful trades. Within 3 years, 83 children had left Wexford Union House. The county budget improved. The institution's dormitories emptied. Sebastian's reputation grew. He was soon considered for national office. If appointed chairman of the National Relief Reform Commission, his program would become a model throughout England. Duchess Beatrice Wexford did not share his pride. She operated a relief fund for widows, injured labourers, and families newly discharged from the workhouse. She knew most people did not enter because they had rejected responsibility. They entered because illness erased wages faster than pride could replace them. Because factories closed, because rent rose, because a husband died and left 3 children behind. Beatrice proposed short-term rent support, childcare, and transitional housing. Sebastian called those measures expensive. Relief must restore independence, he told her. Not reward attachment. A mother loving her child is not dependence. Love does not purchase bread, neither does taking the child away. Sebastian turned back to his reports. In his mind, he was not taking children. He was placing them where sentiment could no longer obstruct opportunity. Ruth Ellison understood the institution from another direction. Before becoming matron of the children's wing, she had lived in a workhouse herself. Her husband, a shoemaker, died of lung disease. For 6 months, Ruth had slept beneath regulations written by men who believed poverty removed the right to privacy. She had been searched, numbered, and separated from people she loved. Years later, after training as an administrator, she accepted the position at Wexford because she believed reform required people who remembered what power felt like from below. Ruth supported genuine apprenticeships. Older children often wanted employment. Some returned proud of new skills and regular meals, but she began noticing irregularities. Children were departing without goodbyes. Brothers and sisters were separated. Letters from parents disappeared into office drawers. Several children described as orphans spoke constantly about mothers still living inside the building. Ruth brought the first questionable file to Sebastian. It concerned Lydia Hale, 12 years old. Her record says both parents are dead. Her father is dead, Sebastian replied. Her mother is in the women's ward. She cannot support the girl. That does not make her dead. Sebastian closed the file. The classification reflects the absence of effective guardianship. It reflects a falsehood. You are interpreting administrative language too literally. Ruth looked at him. The child will read it literally when she is told. No one came for her. Nora Hale had entered Wexford Union House after a fever left her unable to sew. She arrived with Lydia and Thomas and made one demand before signing the relief register. My children remain with me. The admissions clerk assured her that the placement was temporary. 6 weeks later, Lydia disappeared from the children's ward. Nora was informed that her daughter had been sent to a textile establishment with excellent prospects. She demanded the contract. The clerk refused. You do not possess sufficient legal education to assess it. I possess sufficient education to know she is my daughter. The board rejected her objection. When Nora recovered and found work in a laundry, she applied to leave with Thomas. No answer came. She submitted a second request, then a third. Each was stamped as received. None appeared in the official case file. Thomas was placed on the next apprenticeship list. Ruth's suspicions became certainty when she discovered a second ledger in the finance office. The public accounts used respectable phrases: training reimbursement, transport costs, placement administration. The internal ledger used clearer language. Premium received per child. Every entry listed name, age, destination, contract length, amount paid by the employer, transport cost, balance retained by the board, parental status, expected resistance. One column was titled Parental Difficulty. Beside Nora Hale's name appeared 3 notations: emotional, uncooperative, likely to obstruct placement. Ruth carried the ledger to Sebastian's office. Why is a mother's objection listed as an administrative difficulty? Because it delays the child's future. Why does the board receive more money for older, stronger children? The employers contribute towards training. The amount rises with physical fitness. Older children are more expensive to place. Ruth opened Lydia's entry. Why is she listed as an orphan? Sebastian's patience broke. Her father is dead. Her mother is alive. She is incapable of providing. That is poverty, not death. Sebastian took the ledger and closed it. You are paid to manage children, Mrs. Ellison, not interpret the law. Then stop using my records to make living parents disappear. Ruth raised the matter before the full relief board. She brought 17 false orphan classifications, 23 unprocessed requests for family reunification, and evidence that children had been sent below the proper age. The landowners around the table shifted uneasily. Sebastian remained composed. Mrs. Ellison has allowed her own history of dependency to cloud her judgment. My history taught me that entering a workhouse does not end a person's rights. A matron who cannot separate compassion from administration is unsuitable for reform, and an administrator who calls every objection sentiment is unsuitable to govern families. The room became silent. Sebastian felt the sting of humiliation, not because Ruth lacked evidence, because she had challenged him before the very men preparing to recommend him for national office. He looked towards the board. Poor mothers often confuse possession with responsibility. Ruth answered immediately. Children are not possessions, neither theirs nor yours. The following morning, she was dismissed. Her room was cleared. Her brother's shoemaking contract with the institution was cancelled. Letters were sent describing her as unreliable. Nora was banned from entering the administrative office. Thomas's departure was accelerated. Beatrice confronted Sebastian with Ruth's dismissal order. You removed the person who discovered false classifications. I removed a subordinate who refused policy. She refused to call living mothers dead. She does not understand the scale of administration. She understands the children's names. Names do not balance a county budget. Neither should children. Sebastian turned away. He had never taken a payment for himself. Not one penny had entered his private accounts. That fact shielded him from seeing the nature of the transaction. The premiums reduced county expenses. Lower expenses pleased landowners. Pleased landowners supported national promotion. Sebastian did not call it profit. He called it efficiency. Beatrice called it what it had become. A beneficial destination does not create consent. The placements are inspected. Some are. Some are not. The children receive trades. Some do. Then why speak as though I send them into slavery? Because you keep defending where they go, instead of asking whether you had the right to send them. The national inspection was scheduled for early spring. Sebastian prepared Wexford Union House with military precision. Floors were scrubbed. Classrooms received new slates. The kitchens displayed full shelves. Charts showed declining costs, improved health, and reduced child dependency. The children due for apprenticeship were removed from the main lists. 6 were ordered to leave through the rear courtyard on the morning of the inspection. Thomas Hale was among them. Sebastian asked Beatrice to stand beside him during the official tour. Your presence will reassure the commissioners. My presence would imply approval. Your absence will suggest my own wife opposes reform. I oppose transferring children without consent. Would you prefer them to remain paupers? I would prefer poverty not be treated as permission. She attended the inspection, but she walked with the families, not with her husband. The commissioners arrived at 10 o'clock. Sebastian led them through clean dormitories and training rooms. He stopped before a long row of vacant beds. 3 years ago, every place was occupied. Today, those children are learning trades and building independent futures. The chief inspector examined the report. How many placements? 83. Parental consent. Where appropriate? The inspector looked up. Define appropriate. Sebastian redirected the tour towards the kitchens. Outside the front gates, mothers had gathered with documents. Guards refused them entry. Then the sound of carriage wheels came from the rear yard. Nora heard it first. She ran around the building and saw 6 children inside a locked vehicle. Thomas appeared at the small window. "Mama." She rushed forward. A guard blocked her. "That is my son." Sebastian and the commissioners entered the courtyard. "These children are departing for approved apprenticeships," he said. Nora held up Thomas's birth record. "I never agreed. The board assumed guardianship when you entered public relief. I entered because I was sick. The child's future cannot wait upon temporary instability. My poverty is temporary. You are sending him away for 10 years. Thomas struck the carriage door. "Mama." No reform chart could silence the sound. Ruth entered through the gate with the county solicitor. She carried the second ledger. Sebastian's face changed. "That book is property of Wexford Union House." The solicitor answered, "It is evidence concerning contracts executed under public authority." The chief inspector opened it. He found Thomas Hale's name. 8 years old, orphan, parents, deceased. £10 premium, 10-year term. He looked towards Nora. "Are you his mother?" "Yes." "Are you deceased?" Nora began to cry. Sebastian stepped forward. "The classification refers to functional guardianship, not biological fact." The inspector looked down at the page. "It says parents deceased." Ruth placed 17 more files beside it. Behind her, women lifted birth certificates and stamped applications. Beatrice carried a bundle of unanswered petitions into the courtyard and laid them upon the inspection table. Every one bore the board's receipt mark. None had been processed. The inspector read the financial column aloud. Premium received per child. He faced Sebastian. Who paid whom? The employers reimbursed the board for transport and training. Why does the payment increase according to age and physical strength? Sebastian said nothing. Why are objections from mothers recorded as difficulties? Silence. Why were living parents classified as dead? Sebastian looked towards the empty beds visible through the dormitory windows. He had intended them to prove that children no longer depended upon charity. Instead, every vacant mattress seemed to ask where its former occupant had gone. Nora opened the carriage door and pulled Thomas into her arms. No guard tried to stop her. The other children began calling out names. Mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters. The chief inspector closed Sebastian's polished official report. He kept Ruth's ledger open. "The national appointment is suspended." Sebastian drew himself upright. You cannot judge an entire reform by emotional scenes at a gate. The inspector looked towards the signatures beneath each contract. "No, Your Grace." He lifted the ledger. "We will judge it by the documents carrying your name." The carriage remained in the courtyard. Thomas clung to Nora. Behind them stood the institution Sebastian had prepared to offer as England's future. Its rooms were cleaner. Its accounts were balanced. Its children were disappearing. And the Duke's own ledger had finally shown how closely his celebrated efficiency resembled a sale. The carriage was emptied before noon. Thomas remained beside Nora, one hand locked around her sleeve, as though another official might still decide she no longer existed. The 5 other children were taken back into the building while inspectors searched for their families. 2 had mothers waiting at the front gate. 1 had an older brother working in the town. Another had been told both parents were dead, though his father had written every month from a railway camp. Sebastian ordered the staff to restore calm. No one obeyed him. The chief inspector had suspended his authority over every transfer, contract, and family record. Guards who had once moved at the Duke's command now took instructions from the county solicitor. Sebastian stood in the courtyard, surrounded by the machinery of his own administration. The clean walls remained. The new classrooms remained. The balanced accounts remained. Only his right to decide what they proved had disappeared. Beatrice approached Nora and Thomas. "You may leave together today," she said. Nora looked towards the gates. "And Lydia?" The question stopped everyone near them. Thomas was safe, because the carriage had not yet departed. Lydia had been gone for 8 months. No one in the courtyard knew precisely where she was. The investigation expanded beyond Wexford Union House within 48 hours. Every apprenticeship contract was seized. The commission sent messengers to factories, farms, printing houses, and workshops across 6 counties. Of the 83 children listed as successfully placed, 61 had at least one living parent. 47 families had submitted objections. 23 had later secured work or housing and requested their children's return. Most of those applications had never reached the relief board. They had been filed beneath headings such as emotional appeal, premature reunification request, parental interference. The language made grief sound like misconduct. The commission also discovered 14 altered ages. Children of 8 or 9 had been recorded as 11. A clerk admitted the change made them eligible for longer contracts. "Who instructed you?" the investigator asked. "The policy required sufficient placement numbers." "Whose policy?" The clerk looked towards the signature at the bottom of the circular. "The Duke of Wexford." Sebastian was summoned before the commission. He entered expecting to explain the program's purpose. Instead, he faced a table occupied by magistrates, labor representatives, 2 former Workhouse residents, and a lawyer appointed to speak for the families. The chief commissioner opened with one question. "Did you believe the board possessed legal authority to replace the consent of living parents?" "I believed temporary guardianship was necessary for effective administration." "Was that authority confirmed by Parliament?" "No." "By a court?" "No." "By any statute governing the Union House?" Sebastian paused. "Not explicitly." "Then you created it." "I interpreted existing responsibility." The lawyer placed Nora's applications before him. "Did responsibility require hiding these?" "I did not personally file every petition." "Did you approve the rule allowing staff to classify parental objections as administrative difficulties?" "Yes." "Did you know such classifications prevented the applications reaching the board?" "I knew they were filtered." "Filtered according to what?" "The likelihood that reunification would damage the child's prospects." "Who judged that likelihood?" "The administration." "Which answered to you?" Sebastian did not reply. Ruth testified the next day. She did not claim every apprenticeship was abusive. Several children had received useful training. Some employers had treated them with kindness. One printing house taught its apprentices to read, paid wages into named accounts, and encouraged family visits. The commission asked whether such placements should continue. "Yes," Ruth said. "Where the child understands, the parent consents, and someone independent can end the contract if it becomes harmful." "Would you return every child immediately?" "No." A murmur passed through the room. Ruth continued. "Another forced removal will not repair the first one." Some children had lived away for years. Some wished to remain with masters they trusted. Others wanted to return but feared their families could not feed them. Each case required a choice, not a new order issued from another distant table. The wrong was not apprenticeship, Ruth said. The wrong was deciding that poverty made consent unnecessary. Sebastian listened from the rear of the chamber. For years, he had described Ruth as too emotional for administration. Now she was the only person discussing both principle and consequence, without simplifying either. The search for Lydia Hale lasted 3 weeks. Her original contract named a textile mill in Yorkshire. The mill had transferred her to another establishment after 2 months. The board had not recorded the change. By the time investigators found her, Lydia was working in a finishing room outside Leeds. She had received none of Nora's letters. Nora had received none of hers. The mill owner produced a document stating that Lydia's parents were deceased and that the Wexford board held full guardianship. "I was told she had no family," he said. Lydia stood beside him in a grey work dress. When Nora entered the room, neither moved at first. 8 months had taught Lydia not to trust sudden promises. Then Thomas called her name. Lydia crossed the floor and held them both. Sebastian paid for their return from his private funds. He did not travel with them. Beatrice had told him his presence would turn the reunion into another scene about the Duke. For once, he stayed away. The Commission's final report did not erase Sebastian's genuine reforms. Mortality at Wexford had fallen. Food theft had ended. Children had received schooling where none existed before. But those achievements could not excuse the system built beside them. The report found that Sebastian had knowingly treated workhouse admission as surrendered guardianship, approved contracts without valid parental consent, allowed living parents to be classified as dead, accepted payments calculated according to a child's labor value, used those payments to reduce public expenditure, suppressed reunification requests, retaliated against Ruth and her family, accelerated departures before national inspection, presented empty beds as evidence of success while concealing how they became empty. Sebastian lost the chairmanship of the Relief Board. His national nomination was withdrawn. He resigned from the county administration. The Wexford model was rejected. For the first time since inheriting his title, decisions affecting the estate proceeded without awaiting his approval. The financial consequences were severe. The board had accepted premiums from employers who believed the contracts lawful. Some funds had already been spent. Families required transport, legal support, and temporary housing. Sebastian sold his hunting lodge, ceremonial carriages, and several paintings inherited from his grandfather. The money financed a recovery program independent of the Wexford estate. He was not permitted to chair it. Ruth was appointed Director of Family Protection under a new governing board that included parents, workers, teachers, former workhouse residents, and one representative elected by older children. Sebastian offered to restore her previous position. She declined. "I do not need my old room returned," she told him. "I need you unable to remove me the next time I disagree." He accepted the new structure. It was the first reform associated with Wexford that did not rely upon his authority. Not every child returned home. 14 older apprentices chose to remain where they were. Their contracts were rewritten. They received wages, family correspondence, inspection rights, and the ability to leave. 9 children returned immediately. Others spent months rebuilding contact before deciding. Siblings were reunited whenever possible. No employer could transfer a child without notice. No letter could be withheld. No parent could be described as dead while still alive. The work required more money than Sebastian's original program. It was slower. Its reports were less impressive. There were no dramatic rows of empty beds. Beatrice reviewed the first annual accounts. "The cost has risen," Sebastian said. "Yes, some landowners will object." Yes, he waited for her to soften the truth. She did not. This is what it costs when families remain people rather than entries. Sebastian gave his public apology in the courtyard, where Thomas's carriage had been stopped. Families stood where inspectors once gathered. Ruth attended as an official of the new board. Nora stood with Lydia and Thomas. Beatrice remained apart from her husband. Sebastian carried no prepared reform charts. "I called poor mothers unfit because I believed needing help transferred their authority to me," he said. "I recorded living parents as dead because their objections interfered with the system I wished to present as successful." He looked towards the Union House. "I did not take money for myself. I allowed that fact to make me believe no sale had occurred." His voice tightened. "But the accounts received money according to each child's age and physical usefulness. I used those payments to reduce costs and called the result efficiency." He faced Nora. "I treated your poverty as though it were a signature." Nora did not respond. Sebastian continued without asking her to. "I believed a good destination justified the removal. It did not. A useful trade cannot create consent after the child has been taken." There was no applause. He had finally learned that an apology was not another program whose success could be measured by public approval. Beatrice moved into the family support house near town. Sebastian asked when she would return to Wexford Hall. "You still speak as though my return is the final evidence that you have changed," she said. "I am asking because I miss you. That is more honest." He looked down. "I believed I was rescuing children from the workhouse. You rescued the workhouse from having to see them. Some did receive better lives. A beneficial outcome does not create consent backwards." "I know. You understand the sentence?" She regarded him carefully. "I am waiting to see whether you understand it when consent produces an answer you dislike." 3 years later, Wexford Union House no longer functioned as a place where families surrendered control in exchange for food. It had become a transitional center with family rooms, childcare, medical care, and voluntary training. Parents could enter without being separated from their children. One winter afternoon, a young widow named Alice Morgan appeared before the governing board. A manufacturer had offered her 13-year-old daughter a secure apprenticeship. The wages were better than anything Alice could presently provide. The girl did not wish to go. The manager argued that the board should approve the placement regardless. "The mother's income remains unstable," he said. "The child's long-term prospects would be stronger." Sebastian sat at the end of the table with one ordinary vote. Everyone looked towards him. 3 years earlier, he would have spoken about discipline, opportunity, and the danger of sentiment. Now he asked, "Does the girl consent?" "No." "Does her mother consent?" "No." "The answer is therefore no." The manager frowned. "They may return to poverty. Then we offer assistance. And, if assistance fails, we offer another form. That may be expensive." Sebastian looked at the accounts. "Yes." The manager waited. Sebastian continued. "Poverty permits us to offer help. It does not permit us to take ownership." The apprenticeship was refused. No national commissioner was present. No newspaper reported the vote. Sebastian gained nothing from the decision except the knowledge that he had finally supported a choice he would once have overruled. Beatrice had observed from the doorway. After the meeting, they walked through the courtyard together. Children played where locked carriages had once waited. "I once believed an empty bed proved successful reform," Sebastian said. "It proves only that someone is no longer sleeping there. I wanted the numbers to show I had ended dependence. You moved the children so you would not have to count the families." Yes. He watched Nora leave the sewing room with Lydia, now an apprentice by her own choice, and Thomas carrying school books beside them. "I called mothers unfit because temporary support would have required a more expensive system, and a less flattering one." "Yes." Beatrice stopped. "I will return to Wexford Hall." Sebastian looked at her without speaking. "My relief fund remains independent." "Yes. You do not use my work as evidence that I approve yours." "Yes. And when a family chooses differently from you, you remember today's vote." "I will." She offered her arm. They crossed the courtyard slowly. Sebastian never regained his public office. The centre did not restore his name to its entrance. Ruth continued to govern family protection without his permission or interference. The Duke held one vote and no power to dismiss those who challenged him. He had once believed cleaner rooms, balanced accounts, and useful apprenticeships gave him the right to decide what poor families could not. His own ledger proved otherwise. He had not ended poverty. He had turned it into permission. And only when he stopped treating assistance as ownership did Wexford Union House begin helping families without first requiring them to surrender one another.